Hey, I'm here with Ben Foden, who's I mean, you guys are on me, but Ben, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, good evening, everyone. Sorry, in true technical fashion, first time doing this, I'm getting a feedback from something else, so I'll just stop that. Hi, I am Ben Foden. I am a cloud engineer and work with Andrei. Mostly centered on Microsoft Azure, albeit I've dealt with some other clouds such as Google Cloud Platform and AWS as well. I've been working with cloud natively probably for about 8 or 9 years now, and before that, I worked in a application and VMware typical environment of what we call traditional IT, I guess, or at least noughties, tens traditional IT.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So let's just have a chat about because this whole chat is about going from, I guess infrastructure. Sorry, from support to infrastructure to the cloud. That's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
What is your I guess you started off as kind of like support, right? Could you tell us more about your experience there?
Yeah, so I guess my first real job in IT that wasn't work experience or self-made projects was working for a organization locally in doing first line support, and I had that opportunity during my last year of university, and it's very kind of hands-on, very kind of printers jammed, can you come and fix it, or taking support calls, or resetting usernames and passwords, or doing enabling adding a user to a group, that kind of thing in AD. That was kind of very customer facing because I worked in an environment where it was open. We literally weren't necessarily taking phone calls. I used to sit at desks in the middle of kind of big. It was a university environment, so big computer rooms full of studying students, and they used to come to us and ask for whatever they needed doing, and if we could do it, we'd do it. Otherwise, we'd escalate it. Kind of when I graduated from uni, I had the opportunity to do a bit more work over the summer for them, and I did some stuff around physical network cabling and physical networking, and it was just as the university was getting wireless networking installed in all the halls, so I was kind of helping with that a little bit as well.
Mm-hmm.
When I left that job, I moved into an application support role with another medium-sized organisation locally. We weren't developing applications. Our job was to support the applications that the customer, that the business was building. Mostly through reactive monitoring and doing regular kind of maintenance and upgrades. It wasn't so much proactive outside kind of that regular maintenance, but it was very much kind of reactive based on what the monitoring systems were doing, and did a bit of on-call and various other things. And that was my first real taste of being woken up in the middle of the night by a pager or a text message or a mobile phone and having to go and fix it. I applied for a job internally when I was at that organisation and moved into an infrastructure team on the Windows system admin team. But we also met that the same team also maintained the VMware environment.
So, talk to me a little bit more about that. You said you applied for a job internally. Was the company you were working with actually had the infrastructure position open? Was it open to internals, or was it open to everybody basically?
No, it was open internally. As far as I remember, it's a while ago now.
Okay.
I was lucky enough that the company were quite keen on promoting internally their own people, so there's quite a lot of career progression going on in the organisation, and it was, I want to say, a bit of a different time. I mean, this is in 2013, 2014.
Yeah.
It feels like an age ago, but it's only 8 or 9 years. Someone else got promoted out of that team or left a role in that team. I applied for the role. Three people applied, and I was lucky enough to get the role. I remember having a very interesting conversation with the head of IT about, before I was allowed to have any form of elevated privileges whatsoever, kind of like installing kind of the seriousness of power in me, which is something I've lived by since in my whole career since. But yeah, I was lucky enough to be given that opportunity. kind of in the application support world before it as well. I worked a lot of AWS, so that's where my cloud life started out. Wow. Obviously, AWS is still the oldest cloud, the oldest original public cloud, I guess, been 17 years old now. Since it started off saying extra capacity for a bookstore. And then from there, I maintained kind of bringing in because kind of in that organization, the development team and applications were on one side and the systems were on another. We had so much sprawl in AWS and kind of backdoor IT because people didn't want to follow the internal processes. My job was basically to bring all the existing stuff into the internal processes and make sure we were managing the life cycle of those environments correctly.
Yeah.
So I had a very quick learning curve and had quite a big opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I know it's how hard it is. I mean, I've been in that support role before, and gotta say, what you mentioned there a bit earlier about getting that access is one of the hardest things ever, because it's like, because basically at that point you're kind of like support, so you're known as the support guy, right? But then you apply for this role, and they may give it to you, but then they are very cautious about it. If it's compared to an external person, like who came in from that company, they might ask, oh, can I get this? They sometimes might get the access a bit easier than the person who just got promoted up. That's what it's been a little bit from my experience, but I don't know.
I think it works both ways. I mean, I've started in roles where the role needs the access to function, so you will be given that access immediately. That was after this. Before I kind of even worked in IT, I grew up surrounded by, should we say, old computers. Like my dad used to. I don't know how I make this clear. I don't know whether we got given the computers by his friends. We got to remember it was very lucky, kind of in the, I give away my age now, the 90s, for even a family to have a single computer at home. I was quite lucky that my dad used to turn up with old kit that used to bring home. It's basically parts of people's computers that had been thrown out. And I just used to tinker with it and play with it all day long. And, we had kind of an Ethernet network at home before home networking was a thing. When broadband launched in the UK, we were talking about ways to share the internet amongst multiple computers without having to kind of go for a computer as a gateway all the time. In other words, have like a Wi-Fi router kind of situation, which when BT first launched broadband in the UK, it was a USB modem they gave out for you to plug into your computer. So I was lucky that I kind of had a key interest, was mucking around with like trial versions of Windows Server at home and Active Directory, and we used to do like Windows deployments across the network, a little 100 megabit Ethernet network, which was quite interesting. So I labbed a lot out in that environment, and albeit it's not professional, it kind of gives you a backbone. You know how things feel. It's not obviously not professional experience. It's a bit different on scale, but it's not a complete shock to you that you don't know where certain things are in the GUI.
Yeah,
or what commands are. This is pre-PowerShell, so.
Yeah, you hit on a good point there. Like in terms of one of the best ways you can do it is actually by doing a home lab. I mean, I know that we say this, and I mean, I wish I listened to this as well, because I know a few infrastructure guys were like, "Oh, have you, built your home lab and stuff like that?" Kind of did, but I kind of didn't. I think one of the things is if you can build a home lab with like I know this is very traditional, but like an Active Directory domain, like something which has DNS, DHCP services, something which it's like you may be able to have another computer and you have a server, and you can like do some sort of I don't know, maybe a GPO or some sort of like change which forces from the server to communicate to the client. Then you're talking basically infrastructure, and you're kind of getting that experience, because to be honest, once you do a couple of those, then to be honest, the process is almost the same. Yeah, like you just apply another GPO basically.
And there's no excuse now. It's a lot easier than it was 20 years ago when I was doing this, where you were kind of scavenging bits of kit. Computers were expensive. You had to rely on people throwing out Pentium 166 compacts and things. I had some really weird, I'm showing my age a bit because I know that's not old to some people, but to contemporaries that shows the age of the way things are. And nowadays you can just go and get yourself a load of free credit on a cloud. They all pretty much offer free credit.
Yeah.
For either for a limited time, or it could be like 60 days and $100. It could be a year's worth of free services. Like some of them offer a certain size VM, or nothing big, but a certain size VM for a year for free. But even then, if you're careful and you're actually managing your labs, you're only talking pence, and you could be earning quite a bit of experience from just playing with that. Just don't leave things running 24/7. Because obviously you pay for what you use, and if you make that mistake, that's your own fault. But there is no excuse to that. I mean, I remember when I had my first job at 16, which has nothing to do with IT. I went out and bought a couple of compact servers. Literally had a server rack in my bedroom. Luckily, electricity wasn't so expensive back then as it is now. My parents didn't moan me too much for it, and I think they would kind of say it paid off into kind of a worthwhile investment, given some of the stuff I've done since. But yeah, I really do believe that hands-on experience is really important. It doesn't have to be professional experience when you're getting started out. It can literally be just not being afraid to play with things, break things in your own environment, and learn about where things are and what fits together. Basic troubleshooting steps, and then that's, in all honesty, as well, that's relevant until you get to second or even third line support. That's how you keep building.
Yeah, I mean, this video came about because of I had like a colleague of mine contact me about, and she just said, "Oh yeah, how can I? I've worked with him 5 years ago," and he said, "Oh, how can I move from support to infrastructure?" Now I did that. I think the company I was working at, it was a little bit. At the time, it was. I think we were doing so many changes that they didn't really like. I mean, basically, we moved like 11 offices into one building. So it's just like we were making so many changes. I think at that time the promotion capability wasn't actually there for me. Even though I work crazy hours. I worked like from going to the office at like 8, was leaving the office like 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. every day. Just because basically I finished my normal work at 5, but then spent extra 3 hours learning or chatting with the infrastructure guys and everything like that. But I just don't think at that time there was an opportunity to actually, get myself promoted. But at that point, I kind of did switch jobs eventually to get that infrastructure experience. And the thing is, what I find is get yourself good in one thing. Because once you get yourself good in one thing and people like you for that, then people will then give you more responsibility and give you more actions. Like, for example, when I moved into my new role, which was from support to basically an infrastructure role, but my speciality was managing Apple Macs. So Apple Mac servers and all of that kind of stuff. So I specialized in that in order to gone through the interview and and got the job, but they knew I didn't really have much networking, switches, firewall experience. I didn't have that, but I had the Apple Mac speciality, which was really required. So they were like, okay, well, you can have this role, but obviously you have to learn all of this stuff. You have to learn switches and firewalls. That I did, and in my second month, actually working because I was working for a provider for schools. Working for schools, you actually get more access and more to technology than you would in, for example, a private institution. And the fact that what I loved about that time was that during the summer they had projects. So essentially, you're going to be, you're going to be deploying a proxy, or you're going to be deploying a firewall, or deploying some switches during that project.
Yeah.
So when you do that, you learn a lot, as opposed to you coming in, logging onto an infrastructure that's already set up and just learning a few bits about the interface. If you actually set up the, like for example, if you set up a switch from scratch, you plug it in, then you do, and then you configure your VLANs, configure your IP, and everything like that. You learn a lot more than actually just hopping onto a corporate switch and then configuring something.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll say that I share some background from working with those kind of environments as well, schools, and the difference between kind of the operational during the terms and what happens in the summer. But, the biggest takeaway I would take away from that is the amount of access and the responsibilities is going to vary depending on the size of the organization. If you work for a big organization in support, the roles above you are likely to be kind of very specialized, or very kind of, they do this task. So you might be a Windows administrator, you might be a Unix or Linux administrator, you might be a network engineer, you might be a security analyst. The point being, it's quite divided. If you go to a small organization, it's more likely to be 2 or 3 people doing everything, and therefore, in order to create resilience in the team, in case one of you wants to go on holiday, or we quite often talk about the phase of getting hit by a bus or something like that, which is nasty to say, I know, but the idea is they're no longer available for whatever reason. You build resilience by cross-training each other up a lot quicker, and that's a good environment to grow in. I've worked with many people, and I've watched them grow in that environment, whereas in a larger environment, it can be a little bit more. It's not impossible. I mean, I did it in I would say, middle environment. The IT department was 60, 70 people. Across the board, not all technical, but that's how many people in the department. It's not impossible, but you do end up kind of talking to a lot more people, learning a lot, but you also kind of maybe gather more. I don't want to belittle things, but I would say a more rounded view, and maybe a bit more best practice rather than what's needed in the short time we've got to keep things going, get the job done. It's an interesting conversation, but when you say you had the Apple Mac skill from RIP Apple Mac server, that's gone, but it's still relevant in some ways in terms of classroom and deployment and things like that. It's just changed in the terms of when we had Mac OS server. Yeah. But how do you pick that skill to concentrate on when you're learning? Because IT, you're right, it's such a vast subject. Different areas of expertise, so many different technologies. It's not just one technology. It's not just 10 technologies. It's not 20 technologies. So how do you pick that one thing to concentrate on? What's the value of it?
I mean,
it's like we, I guess people's jump to answer is going to be, considering the kind of environment we're talking about and kind of our background now, the answer would be cloud. Now, you will never know the whole of cloud. I don't know the whole of cloud. Andrei won't mind me saying this, but he doesn't know the whole of cloud. You know what you're good at, and you know areas of cloud. The fact is, all the cloud providers are adding multiple products, multiple different technologies on a very much a daily basis. And even then making changes. I think Azure is over 200 odd services, for example, now. No one knows all 200 services, not even the people who work for Azure. So you obviously know the basics of Azure, and you can quite often translate that into learning very quickly about new services in Azure. Or same goes for any cloud platform. I'll probably keep talking about Azure given our background, but you're not gonna know everything. So where do you start? Where do you pick? Where's the starting point for that whole conversation? These evenings after work when you're sat at home with your laptop with a hypervisor installed on it of some nature, building VMs to have a play in a lab. I mean, that's the simplest form. That's what I was doing in 2013. Yeah. After work, I used to come home and sit on my MacBook Pro. I was just really into Apple and had been for a number of years, but sit at home on my MacBook Pro and build VMs and set up labs on it, and that's what I was doing.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very interesting question. I mean, I guess it might be up to, well, it's one of those that you have to find. What I find is you gotta find something A you're excited about, and B which can fill a need. So, for example, if your organization is struggling, I'm missing this skill, it's just at least try and go for that. Then you define yourself as the expert in that department. So, and then they might go, well, he's proven competent in this department. Then of course we can give him the other tasks such as switches or firewalls or whatever. But like they can start giving you that because you've proven yourself in one area which you've got real expertise in. So I think that's the two key points. I think we'll have another conversation about whether you should stay or leave your organization, but we'll have that chat later on. But for now, moving from support to infrastructure, those are your kind of options. You have to look at your organization and see what you can actually learn to help to deliver that, or if there's no really any gap that you can fill, then you might have to look elsewhere. It's I'm just trying to be real here because it has happened to me where I tried to fill some sort of gap, but I guess I just didn't get there. I guess from that point of view, but yeah.
I think another conversation is as well, and it quite often comes a lot in no matter whose YouTube videos you watch or podcasts to talk to when we're talking about this subject, is the value of certifications versus the value of experience.
That's right.
Right. I've got a view on this. And I would say from when I've been in a position to kind of do interviews with people in the past, where I've quite often done the technical part of the interview rather than the HR stuff, is being has been to kind of say experience is more important than certs. Certs, in a lot of cases, the certs are good at showing you've got a foundational grasp of something, but they cover such a wide area of topic in quite a short test that actually, it shows you've got good foundational knowledge, you understand the concepts, but actually, how do you do this in a day-to-day actual environment? I'm just picking on what James has said in the chat. Sorry, in regards to fast-moving pace of the cloud, rather have vast knowledge in Azure instead of small bits across Azure, AWS, GCP. You're right. I think that comes back to what I was saying about understanding the concept of Azure, how it all knits together, or any cloud platform, and what the different technologies are. But the point that that's not the point I'm making. I have spoken to people in the past who've come across saying, I know Azure, but then what they don't mean is they understand Azure and the concepts behind Azure and virtualization and IaaS, PaaS, SaaS, all the stuff we talk about day to day. They've literally tried to say they know every technology in Azure and every different service in Azure in detail, and they've used it all. I think that kind of person is a bit of a unicorn if they do exist.
Yeah, I mean that's right. I mean, to be honest, it's more about not the specific technology, but the way you work and the way you are able to implement something, and the way you are able to learn something in maybe a short period of time to deliver something, because the world is ever changing. Sometimes you may not. You may have worked with one specific area, but they might want a bit more deeper, or might want a bit more of a specific set, which you might have not had that full experience in, but the basics of it to actually go in there. You've experienced enough like other projects that you can actually pick this up as well. It's such a learning mindset.
I think being able to talk at cloud and understand concepts of cloud in a generic sense, and kind of know at the headlines of the common services in any cloud is key, right? And so Azure Virtual Machine, AWS EC2, Google Compute, engine. They're all virtual machine engines, so it's about being able to translate between them. That all comes with experience. I do think that's a good way to do foundational courses or foundational kind of labs. You don't have to go on Udemy or something like that and pay for it. There's plenty of free content out there available on the internet if you start Googling for it. Andrei's got some very good stuff that goes a bit beyond getting started in terms of, deploying the cloud adoption framework with Terraform. But, I'm sure that developers' time goes on into some more kind of relevant stuff for this level. But ultimately, yeah, James, you are right to a point. Yeah, it's a struggle even on a daily basis. I mean, I've got RSS feeds and blogs that kind of feed into me, and I kind of have a scan through every morning before I start work. But it's still too much going on.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're talking now moving from infrastructure to the cloud, because to be honest, I had that experience, and to be honest, infrastructure nowadays could be the cloud. That's the other difference. Is like before, when I when I started learning about cloud about 4 years ago, I thought it was still quite. It was getting there, but like now, and especially since the pandemic happened, infrastructure and cloud have there's pretty much a lot of businesses have moved into the cloud or are definitely planning to move there already. So it's kind of
yeah. I mean, we've had cloud for years. I used to work with. Depends what we're defining the word cloud as. Let's just say cloud is virtualization. I mean, I've worked with some Linux engineers in the past who would tell you that I can't remember the name of the technology. Don't quiz me on that. But like the idea of containerization and running without a kernel within a Linux operating system or Windows operating system has been around since the 70s and 80s and has been used in certain environments. I can't remember what it was called, but VMware in itself, they would market in the end as a cloud product, and that's where the idea of private cloud came from. I would argue most of the environments we see commonly at the moment are still hybrid cloud environments. And if you would have noticed, the big public cloud providers have recently made a push to kind of illustrate that they see hybrid cloud as a big thing, that they kind of backtracked on it being full-blown public cloud, to actually realizing hybrid cloud is the biggest way to drive that journey. And you see that across multiple different things. If we're talking SaaS in kind of the Office 365 world, Microsoft 365, that's been a big drive for a number of years. It's always been hybrid Exchange. For a while, it was hybrid Link and Skype. Hybrid file shares and file delivery, and a bit it's got a bit and hybrid AD, AD Connect. I know I'm naming technologies here, so I'm going to backtrack, but the point I'm saying is hybrid has been the way forward for years, and the cloud has always been around probably for as long as my career's been. It's just changed form.
Yeah.
And like I said, AWS started out with free services, which was selling their extra capacity that they had for running their website as a bookshop at the time. That's what AWS was. It was EC2, S3, and I want to say Route 53, but I think that's incorrect. Or it might be RDS. I think RDS came after us. I'm not entirely sure. But the point being, free services is now, once again, hundreds. And they do things all over the world, from AI to game servers to, traditional virtual machines to databases to networking. I mean, you've got the cloud providers moving into spaces such as the traditional telephone companies, telcos, where they're doing, in the past you'd have to have an MPLS to have a business connected network across the whole.
I mean, Teams
environments have been, now we can do virtual MPLS in effect.
I mean, Microsoft Teams has really changed that as well. I mean, what you're talking about, because it's just like I've worked in some businesses where they got rid of their whole kind of phone line altogether and just focused on Teams. That just shows the power of the cloud. The power of having that technology which you can use instead of having that traditional sense.
And there's been a massive acceleration. Unfortunately, the pandemic has had pros and positives and negatives, but one of the things it has done is severely accelerate cloud adoption, as businesses need to support hybrid working. and everything else, Microsoft 365, Zoom, Cisco WebEx, all of those they're all grown in popularity during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Which, was a whole subject to its own right. But in terms of that move from infrastructure to cloud, I was already working with cloud in my infrastructure role. That's kind of a bit different. To the point, I'm just going to move over to Alliance and I'll just keep going off camera. But I was already working with AWS, and then I was working with Azure as well, and Microsoft 365. And ultimately, it would be that experience that would lead to the next role of working in the cloud.
I mean, I was exactly the same. I mean, as infrastructure, you go and work with M365 or Exchange, Teams administration or whatever it is, the whole 365 suite. And then you kind of want to work with for example, Azure Virtual Machines or Azure, SaaS services, and you wanna work with those. But the companies what I was working at, basically nobody really grasped the actual Azure. They were still quite a while yet. Most of them either have just moved from Exchange to Office 365. That's kind of the move they did. They did the whole SharePoint and did that kind of move, and they weren't quite ready yet to adopt that whole cloud strategy. But I'm sure it's gotten there now. But it's like when I was working at that point, they didn't. So I was like, okay, I really want to work with this, but I couldn't get that experience. So in fact, contrary to what Ben kind of said, like the certifications, me doing the certifications actually helped me land that job, because what happened with me was I basically did the Azure Administrator certification, did the AZ300, and then I was waiting for the next one, 304 or something like that, because it was in beta and there was pandemic. Things were going crazy a little bit at that time. But anyway, I had the interview, and basically I was honest. Okay, I think that's one of the key parts about it, being honest. Being honest that you know what I said. Look, I don't have much experience in the cloud. I don't actually know how to, do all of this, but I have. I don't know how to do all of this in a corporate environment. However, what I've done, I've configured virtual machines thanks to my course, because I actually configured that as part of my course. I didn't just did a few exam questions and did all of that. I actually did that practical experience, which then I said that in the interview, and they asked me those technical questions, and I was able to answer that. And when they asked me a question I didn't know, I was honest. I basically said I didn't know.
Because I would second the honesty thing. I'm going to be honest. It is much more. When I've been interviewing, I've often looked back, and the way I go for interviews now is completely based on what I would like to,
Yeah, well, we'll have interviews later on, but
what I'm trying to say is, honesty is always the best policy. If you can demonstrate, actually, I'm taking a guess here. I think I know roughly, or I've got no clue at all. But you're honest; it's a guess. And you're shown to be giving a go and being eager to learn. That's a lot better, whether you get the answer right or wrong, than kind of, I guess, being a little bit full of yourself and saying, actually, no, I believe it's this, and getting it wrong. Humility goes a long way. I do really think that's the best policy. But it's interesting about certification. I think people have different views on them. I didn't get my first certification, which was actually a MCSA Windows Server 2012, until until like probably 3 or 4 years into my career.
Yeah.
And I've got so many Azure ones now. I struggle to keep track, and I get upset when I get the renewal notices now. So you got 6 months to renew them or whatever, because it'll come through in droves.
Yeah. Comment as well. 100%. You're just looking like a fool and a liar if you try and blag it. It has also worked in my favor several times. People give more respect for it, and yeah, they do. They do, because at the end of the day, they want a guy who is actually honest with them and says, look, I can do this, or I can't do this. Can you show me? That is the most critical asset for a person, to be honest and say, look, I don't know this, but can you show me how to do it? And I will learn how to do it, and then I'll do it. And I've had that many a times. Like, for example, when when I was in the infrastructure role, I didn't know, like, for example, how to do switches. And one of the schools, basically the switch went. So they said, you're going to have to be the guy that's on site and takes that switch out of the box, replaces the switch, and configures it. I had no idea. Okay. But the thing is, because I was honest and said that, I got help. I got people remoting in and, like, looking at my screen and, helping me with all the commands and everything like that. But if you're not honest, if you say, I know switches, and then it comes to that point when you need to actually replace a switch, you have no idea how to do that, then that's when it's going to really bite you in the ass. So, it's just like, that's why.
I don't think there's any negotiation on it. You always get the better result, no matter which way you're doing it, by being honest and being true to yourself. It's just a way to live life.
Exactly.
And I think as well, one thing I was going to say that I didn't pick up on earlier, but this is the way my brain works. I'm sorry, it's like a massive mess of stuff going round and round and round. But Andrei mentioned earlier about that guy who stayed late and talked to the infrastructure guys when he was in support. Now, I would say it goes a long way showing an interest to your peers as well, who, if you're applying for a job internally, for example, might be I wouldn't say it's anything thingy, but obviously they get to know you. They might be able to judge how you are and what your skills are like, and kind of whether you'd be a good fit for the team, even if you already work for that organisation. And secondly, it shows a bit of willingness and a bit of dedication to your employer almost. I remember when I was in support, we had flexi time, so this is a bit different, because basically if you worked long hours one day because of a business need, you'd get the time back. So I realise now is not something, the luxury that a lot of people get. But say there was a major incident that required a change to fix a customer-facing issue, like an external customer-facing issue, so a paying customer issue, and someone had to do it that evening, and it had to be done after 6 o'clock. I regularly used to stay till 8, 9 o'clock making changes to systems or doing upgrades and things like that. Just volunteer for it. Get to know things, get to know people you don't work with on daily. Because generally, the people who stay behind to do that kind of things are not people. It'll be a smaller team. You'll be working together, and it wouldn't necessarily be the people you talk to on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
But I think Andrei and I've got but like I said, my background was, it was very segregated. So the team I moved into an infrastructure didn't do anything other than VMware and operating system environments. Yeah. We didn't touch switches, we didn't touch firewalls, we didn't touch security. We had whole teams managing change. We didn't touch application code. We didn't touch middleware, albeit I'd previously touched middleware in the old job. So it is very much a everyone has a personal experience, personal kind of view, but yeah.
So that's definitely something which I think is something that you may need to. Now, in terms of what kind of, like, I guess let's talk a little bit about. We kind of touched about, like, the interview and chat and then the organization and everything like that. But we talked about kind of like the key skills, and like I wanna touch a bit on certifications, because I find certifications are helpful, but only if you do it in the right way. Only if you actually apply the practical application. Basically, use the certification not like the exam is an end goal. Okay, you forget about that. What I would say is focus that your goal by taking up the certification is it provides you a path of the learning journey. Okay, so say for example you wanted to move into infrastructure, you could do Network Plus, you could do CCNA, but you can't just go ahead and do like open up, like, for example, one of those multiple choice questionnaires and try and do that. You have to actually pick up the switch yourself. You have to order the switch.
Yeah.
You have to configure the switch yourself. And think of that as a learning journey. So therefore, the stuff that you read, make sure that that's backed up by a practical application. Otherwise, you're doing yourself a disservice. So those are the ones I would actually recommend if you were going to move into infrastructure. Also, there's a couple of Microsoft exams that have come out recently, which are really helpful. I would say the AZ800 and AZ801, which are the hybrid server. Get that.
I completed that yesterday.
You need to complete it, but yeah, it's definitely something which has come out, I think, in November, and it's something that people have been looking forward for a long time, because basically since the Windows Server 2016 certification expired and ended, people were looking for a new, and that's why I feel for the support in the last 5 or 6 years, because there wasn't really a certification that you could actually get to, help and advance your knowledge. But now there is, and but as I say, you need to actually apply the practical applications towards it.
Yeah, I think a lot of that certification gap on the Microsoft side came from them reworking the way they wanted to do certifications.
Yeah.
And moved more towards competency and technology-based certifications rather than like product certifications.
Yeah.
So, and that's with the drive for Azure. I mean, I was going to say earlier, those that have been around in Azure know that Azure, when it first came out, was a horrible Silverlight management platform with a really non-existent API. That's what we now call Classic, which is, by the way, if you're on Azure and you're on Classic, please do stop using it and migrate away from it. We believe it or not, we still see that. But in terms of moving on to kind of what the resource manager or ARM-based deployments, that kind of change led Microsoft to kind of realize, actually, no, we need to break this up. We can't just do a certification on Azure. We've got to do role-based certifications. We've got to do administrator, DevOps engineer, developer, architect, security engineer, network engineer, hybrid administrator, and they're the ones that come off the top of my head.
Yeah. So as we say, I think AZ104 is a good starting point. AZ104 is a very good starting point because you get to learn a lot. You get to learn about, even if you're just in a support role at the moment and you want to move up, I think obtaining that Azure administrator will go a long way. But again, only as you do it, because I think what happened was when I was doing it, they had labs. Okay, so I had to make sure I knew my stuff when I actually took the exam and took the labs. I think for 2 or 3 years they stopped doing labs, but I think the labs are back now. So essentially, that is a test. And if employers are watching, I mean, people who are doing some certifications are actually doing labs as well now. But again, it's sometimes hit and miss, so it's difficult to prove that as well. So
yeah, I mean, I did the original, so when I did it, it was AZ100 and AZ101. It was a two-parter exam, and there were labs.
Yeah.
I won't say any more than that, but I did hear that you that from a few people that the labs had disappeared.
Yeah.
I still don't think. I mean, we quite often get asked, like Microsoft have the foundational certs, don't they? So they have AZ900, MS900, basically what they call the foundational certs. And once again, for learning the language of the product, they're not really technical qualifications. They teach you how to be able to speak about the products. So, almost most people I know on the engineering side skip straight to the AZ100 series and don't bother with the 900.
Yeah.
I do know a few people have done both, who've, kind of thought, oh, well, why didn't I just do AZ100 straight away? And by 100, I mean whatever the series and exam numbers are now, because I know they've been through many iterations on that cert. That's quite often a topic of debate. But it's almost like, I think the exam fee is about £165, including VAT, if you're unlucky enough to have to pay it. Which I understand to a lot of people might, if you're working in sport, that's quite a bit of money. I mean, ask your employer if they'll, do it as part of professional development and pay you for it and you put the work in. Some employers will say, we'll pay for it once, but if you fail it, then it's on you. I've definitely had that relationship earlier in my career.
Yeah.
But then, if not, then sometimes it's necessary to invest in your career and, to make that jump, and it might lead to a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, my employer at that time also did that, but for me, I just felt like I invested for me and for myself, and that gave me more motivation, because I find that when employers ask you to do something like a certification or something like that, you are less motivated than you actually starting it yourself, starting and getting that train going, then that motivation is there, and then you just you learn, and I think you got more of a spark, let's just say, to try and move up, rather than I have this career plan, gotta try and follow it.
Yeah, I mean, you'll hear about teachers and educators, which is the industry my partner works in, talk about different ways of learning, the way people learn. So some are visual, some are audible, some like to actually practically hands-on do things. I'm very much a practically hands-on person. The way I learnt things is to play with them, and obviously in a safe environment, and kind of somewhere I'm not going to do anything silly. But that's where the labs come in, and a lot of how do I put it? Some sites, some of the learning sites. So I think Pluralsight sites, 𝐥𝐤𝐤𝐿 Guru is one. They give out as part of the subscription fee, they do give you access to a lab. So like when you're doing the test, they do the James, I was just about to say that, but so Microsoft do run events. And this is a good example. Microsoft do run events for certain things around development, and it's been a really big thing over the past few years. So it's not only if you go to things like the big Ignite events, it's also some of the online events now. They do give out vouchers for exams if you attend those events and take part. Sometimes if you're in the UK, at least, you're very lucky in terms of some of these events are online and start as work finishes for the day. And you can stay online into the evening and do them. But yeah, I would definitely it does almost require, if you're stuck, if you think you're stuck, the only way you can kind of push forward is to start to invest in your own learning and development. And maybe once you've got a couple of certifications or some labs behind your belt, then start to look at positions whereby you can progress even more through the support of the company, if it's your existing employer or a new employer. I mean, I was watching an interesting thing yesterday. I don't know if Andrei will like me mentioning it, but there's obviously a lot of YouTubers out there talk about this subject, and it was ironic that yesterday, as we're about to start this session a week later than planned, that Network Chuck on YouTube was talking about getting your first job in cloud and writing a CV from someone who was literally in this situation, maybe had done a bit of support, well, not in cloud, in IT, but beyond support, done a bit of support, done a lot of labs for that experience, got some certifications, but the professional experience is hard to come by. Show what you can do, prove what you can do. depending on what role you're going after, even having a public GitHub is relevant with an active public GitHub. There's no point putting an inactive one on your CV, but an active public GitHub.
Public GitHub, LinkedIn. It's like I know yourself when you're not a LinkedIn, but like user, but you have signed up to it now. But so keep connect with him. But yeah, it's like in terms of I think LinkedIn is like a powerful resume. I think it's like you basically, if you have your profile out there, you will have like recruiters contact you. If you manage to show what you're doing, have like a active GitHub, even if it's just like you've done some code, show what you've done, show your project, show what I think that's one of the key things that people miss out when they look for jobs, is to say what they've done. Because if they show what they've done, and I'm not talking like your day-to-day, I got in at 9, I responded to some tickets, and I answered and all of this. I'm talking about like actual projects. Like, for example, if you were gonna create a web server or something like that, just create a web server and show it on your GitHub. Have an active something, for people to see. Oh, look, he's at least played with this technology, so we can actually rely on this, or we can train up this person a bit more. But people are not going to recruit you if you basically show nothing. So
yeah, I mean I think LinkedIn's an excellent tool. I've got different reasons for why I deleted it and set up a new account. Just don't. It's nothing to do with you thinking LinkedIn's not. It's almost a obviously the way to LinkedIn Microsoft and the Microsoft own LinkedIn, for those of you who don't know, but the way they make money out of it is to basically sell it as a recruitment platform to potential recruiters. And they obviously have AIs and search tools for searching for candidates and looking for keywords in people's profiles where you have allowed that. So, and it's only useful in this case if you allow that kind of use, because otherwise recruiters aren't going to find you. But it is all about kind of getting to know people, having those conversations, and you'll get a few really kind of, should we say, boomerang posts where people contact you about a job and you'll reply back and they won't ever reply. Don't feel disheartened. That's the way that LinkedIn is. But at the same time, don't give away too much information. Like if someone contacts you on LinkedIn and asks for your CV, the best advice I would say is, by all means, put your phone number and email address on there. But don't put, as an employer, I don't need to know your date of birth. I don't need, at this stage, I don't really need to know your address. Then it's about controlling that public data. But I'm just going to keep telling me off for talking about it. But the other thing I was going to say is, I do think like one excellent way to kind of get used to working with new technology, using the example of building a web server. Now, Andrei's heavily used the phrase ClickOps. It's a fact of life. You end up doing things in GUIs and portals when you work in IT. It's just the way things are. Because if it's not actually in the operating system or whatever you're administering, it is like configuration within an application or something similar. But as a challenge, stretch that. So I want to build a web server. Well, I'm a Windows admin. Okay, I'm going to build it. But okay, I want to go build it on Linux. I'm going to build it with Nginx rather than Apache. I'm going to configure it all securely. And then take that to the next level again. And say, actually, I'm going to automate this deployment. I'm going to make it so I kick off at this stage. I kick off a script, and the script does it all, and I don't have to do anything. And then the next step is to wrap that all in, some kind of provider such as Terraform or PowerShell, talking to ARM or something like that, and just keep layering it and showing that development journey as you move. I'm going to say up the stack. It's actually down the stack. The example I've been talking about, but just show that progression that actually you've gone beyond what. By that stage, you've gone beyond what most people who are looking for their first job in infrastructure or cloud have ever done.
Yeah,
they've not taken some. I've known people, including myself, I was at this stage, who installing software on a Windows server, stop clicking a MSI or running MSI exec or something like that, Move beyond it. Start to kind of stretch yourself on that what seems like a rather simple project, something kind of low key, and just push it into actually, I can do desired state configuration in PowerShell, or maybe I can do Ansible, and then maybe I can map that in Terraform, or maybe I can map it in Bicep. It doesn't. The point being that one little spark grows, and then suddenly you can bring all sorts of technology into it.
One thing I want to say is don't focus on the technology per se. Focus more on the what you actually want to achieve. Because if you focus, like I said, build a web server, but I didn't say why. I said, what you need to focus on is I want to show the employers or potential recruiters my profile. Start with that. If you say that, and then you're going to say by building a web server, and your web server is basically your means. So if you have that goal in mind, then you will learn a lot more, and you're going to be trying to improve that goal more with the technology that you're given.
Yeah, I think that's my point. So it's the process of building it, and how you get on there, and how you grow on that, and kind of build to it. Different companies will use different technologies as a fact of life. The fact is, most of the technologies have all got similarities with each other. So even if, for example, I don't know, I'm picking technology off the top of my head here, but you decide to do something in design configuration with Puppet, but the company you apply for will use Ansible, or Chef, or PowerShell DSC, or I could list loads, but the point being, if they use something else, the fact that you have at least gone through the process and the mind thought and actually understand what you're trying to achieve shows an awful lot. And I'm sure you'll pick up the technology specific differences in no time whatsoever. That experience means a lot when you're at that stage. Those labs mean a lot, and don't be afraid to do it. I mean, by all means, put on there that you've had on. I'm going to CV land again. I would rather see someone's experience in their labs and show that they've had a job, whether that's working in a bar or working, if you're lucky enough to have that. When you're trying to even get into support, just show a keenness to want to learn. I don't know. If you're applying to a job in IT, it's not really relevant to know that you pulled pints behind the bar for 20 hours a week. It's more relevant that you had a job and held that down, and I can get a reference for it to prove you're reliable. But what you exactly did isn't relevant. When you move into IT, it's more about when you're actually in IT, you can demonstrate under your job what you did in each job in terms of generic technologies. And Andrei, I'll stop.
We're happy because we're talking about moving from, and I guess this, as we say, you could find it within your company, or you might have to look elsewhere. But I would say just evaluate what your business, the company you're currently working at, and what they require. If there's a skill that you can fill, or ask how you can maybe move up there. And if you're not finding that you got that leeway, then you know what, there's loads of places that actually are willing to take you, as long as you've got the willingness to learn and that you are honest with them. And I think those are the two key parts about it.
And like I said earlier on, I'm conscious that when I was at this stage we're talking about now, it was a long time ago in comparison, and things have changed a lot, not only in what we work with, but also maybe in the way people apply for jobs. But I would still say showing a passion for something and playing with it and experiencing it and understanding the process and how it nets together and what each of the technologies do that you're messing in, being able to explain that to me, you'll go probably a long way from the, in my opinion, from kind of being in support. And don't be afraid of support. I know a lot of people think being in support or applying to a support role when you come out of university or college or whatever is kind of, I don't want to say frowned upon, but I know there are people who think that. It's not at all. because you gain so much experience on support in terms of the type of stuff that goes on, what goes on operationally in IT, the processes, frameworks most companies use, tooling that companies use, the kind of products that company has, the kind of customers or internal employees that use those services that company has. And it is a good place to garner a lot of wide-stretching knowledge very quickly in an early career. And I have.
Kat, here is your reminder. Take amatric to lean.
Sorry, 2 seconds.
Yeah. So there we are. But yeah, I think Ben was talking.
Sorry.
Yeah, go
Sorry.
ahead.
My wife has a alarm set on Alexa that goes off at 9 o'clock every night. Even though I put the one in here on Do Not Disturb, it still went off anyway by its own thing. So yeah, I sorry if I set off your or anyone's by saying that, by the way. But yeah, what I was going to say is, I do know some people I've spoken to recently privately about trying to find their first job in IT. Have done a qualification and think they can are basically looking for quite a senior role from the off. And don't get it wrong, but I'm talking kind of senior developer roles, and don't understand when they've got no CV, no portfolio or repository of relevant experience other than their qualification. Don't understand why their CV is getting thrown to one side, but that's a topic for another day.
Yeah. So, what are your key points, and then we'll summarize and finish up this call. What would be your from that?
Yeah. My top 3, if I was in support and wanted to move into infrastructure and then on into cloud, and I think at this stage we're assuming infrastructure and cloud are largely very tightly related as they've grown to be. One is to be eager to learn, take the opportunities in your support role that are thrown at you, whether that's just kind of going the extra mile on a ticket or a call that maybe you go a bit further, talk to the second or third line engineer who's working on that ticket, not only from kind of chasing it on the customer if it happens, but also kind of understanding what the process is and what exactly went wrong. It's easier to do in an organization where people write good notes on ticket management systems, I will admit, because sometimes you get really rubbish notes and sometimes you get really, really good notes. Do labs, gain the experience, even though it's not kind of in an environment, but actually go out there, learn about stuff, stretch a goal, come up with a goal. Web server is a good one. Keep up, but don't only concentrate on the processes and technologies. Don't be put off when you don't see a technology you've been working with in a job app. Explain kind of, if like a PowerPoint, explain what you've done with the technologies you have done with.
Mm-hmm.
And thirdly is probably don't be afraid to network and talk to people about opportunities and discuss things on LinkedIn, or be open to finding next connections. You don't know what's going to happen and where you'll end up, and I don't think anyone does, to be honest. I think we all it's kind of very binary decisions, and if you're not, the old phrase, if you're not in it, you won't win it, kind of thing. You've got to be in it to win it. There is a lot of truth in that. It might be you have to send out a CV after CV after CV. Maybe get someone else to look over your CV if you've got someone who works and what kind of role you're looking for. Ask them to look at your CV and make any recommendations. Make it easy to read, and we'll go over that in the future anyway. But yeah, don't be let down if the first one doesn't work out. Don't be let down if the first 2 or 3, 4, 5 don't work out. The keenness, just keep going with those points 1 and 2, and you'll get there.
Yeah. And if you need any extra support, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. I've got the Discord community set up. Again, post a YouTube comment. We're quite open to try and helping you. So just reach out, and we'll do our best to help you. So with that, it's been a really good first live stream, and we will be back next week. I don't think we have decided on a topic for next week, but it might be. We'll see.
We won't be back next week. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time.
In 2 weeks' time. Sorry, in 2 weeks' time we'll be back. And if you have any topics that you want us to cover, we'll give us a message and we'll consider it. Then yeah, we'll go from there. All right then. See you all in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Have a good evening, everyone. Thanks for your time. Thanks for watching.
Bye bye.